Okay, thank you, Emily. James, can you go to the first slide? Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Gorman. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at iPublish Media Solutions, and I want to thank everyone for giving us some time this afternoon, and also for the LMA from giving us this opportunity. We're joined today by three extremely wonderful customers of ours: Sally Steed from the Utah Media Group, Michael Fibison from Advanced Local, and Ed Woods from the Media News Group. And before we get started, let me just kind of go over what we're going to cover today. So I'm going to give you a brief history of our company and our business approach. An interesting thing happened last year. I took some time off. And in doing that, I really thought about our company. I was one of the founders. We started iPublish originally as Wave 2 about 14 years ago. And I was doing some research on software startups and realized, and I read in a number of places, that 93% of software startups don't make it to the fourth year. And we were in our 14th year of business. So I was like, 14 years flew right by. And I was wondering, well, what is it exactly that we did? So I started thinking about it, and then I thought about how did that relate to our customers? Because one of the things that we're really proud of is that we have really extremely great customers. We have a great relationship with our customers. I think they appreciate us, and we appreciate them tremendously. So when we started the company, we really just had a very simple concept. It was self-service advertising. So someone could come to a website, they could buy an ad, they could build an ad. And that was pretty much it when we started. We passed the elevator pitch. There was a lot of value in that. We saw that it could increase revenue. It could reach advertisers you wouldn't typically get to. It would lower not only sales expense, but also operational costs as well. So in starting our development, the one thing that we did not want to do was to just develop ourselves into a box by application. We wanted to build a platform, and a platform is a very overused word these days. But what we built was a platform. It was enterprise capable. It was extremely flexible, so we could import data very easily to it. We could export data from it. It was very scalable. We used industry standard tools and techniques in the development process. And then when I went out as the Chief Revenue Officer to look for opportunities, we didn't try to boil the ocean. We looked for very attainable applications that we could get installed quickly and meet the customer's requirements to provide a return on investment. The other thing we did in doing this was we had already, myself and my two partners, we had already done multiple startups, and we made all the mistakes before. So we wanted to have a standard architecture across all our applications and for all of our customers. So today, we have 700 websites. And if we get a support call from a customer, every one of our engineers can log into any one of those sites and they know exactly what they're looking at. So what does that mean? Well, that means that our customers are going to get really, really good support, and that we can keep our organization really flat and small. So we did that. Over the last 5 years, we've more than doubled our revenue, and we have not hired a single employee. So we were able to scale this business because we did all those things. And the importance of that was by having a really flat organization, every one of our employees is very close to the customers. So there isn't anything lost in translation. Our developers take support calls. And so we all know who our customers are. Our customers know who we are. And we just have built this virtual dynamic culture that exists between us and our customer base. So when thinking about this webinar, we thought, well, maybe we should share this information with our customer base and the industry, because everyone's going through COVID. Everyone's had tremendous stresses on their business during this year, and everyone's hoping to come out of this. Are you going to make operational changes that maybe you learned during this period? And we think that the way that we've approached this, because people have asked us, has COVID affected your business? And it's only affected our business in that it's affected our customers. It really hasn't affected us that much because we are a virtual company to begin with. and we kept ourselves very lean and very dynamic. So we wanted to share that with you and then translate that over to some customer use cases so you could see how it's benefited them as well. And that's the purpose of the webinar today. So when we look at our history, when we started the company, we had something called the Wave 2 publishing platform, which we now call the iPublish publishing platform. And we paid Adobe a lot of money to use InDesign Server. Now we did that because it fit into our whole enterprise scheme. You don't necessarily need InDesign to build an obituary, but if you want to publish a lot of things in print, and we also use it for digital, it's an excellent starting point. We then built our e-commerce workflow. We called that iPublish Ad Portal. Originally, we only had two applications: retail and celebrations. And then we were presented with an obituary opportunity and more classified opportunities. Then we didn't have an actual classified platform, so we developed that. And then once we didn't have a search and replace marketplace, we built that. Now, all these things were built on opportunities in the marketplace and working with our customers. And our customers, we would sit down with them, we would understand their requirements, we would come back and we would deliver on what we said we were going to deliver on. So we just kept building out the platform. Now, we did this, every time we did this, we did it on the same platform. We added digital along with print. We then added responsive design. We added programmatic advertising in addition to O&O digital, so we could do targeted. Then we started adding social media, Facebook and Instagram. We just recently added video. So all of these applications are all on our platform. All 700 websites can access these applications. And it's just a question of building the right business model for our customers so that they can take advantage of them. Now, if we look at the chronology, our first customer was actually the Boston Globe. We're in the Boston area. We had a long-term relationship with them, but it was a custom implementation. In 2008, we implemented our first ad portal, one of the 700 sites, and that was with the Virginia pilot. We then implemented real estate, the Houston Chronicle. We were approached by McClatchy, the Raleigh News and Observer, about obituaries, which we had never done before. We had to modify the software slightly, but again, on the platform. And we implemented obituaries. And because we had these varying applications, and because we could do print and digital, we received in 2010 two enterprise agreements, one with Gannett and one with Media News Group. And we just kept adding to that. The Virginia pilot, who was our very first customer on Ad Portal, was looking for a classified system. And they knew we didn't have it, but we talked to them, we explained how we would do it, and we had delivered before, so they took a chance and we implemented classified. And then by having that in 2015, we got a corporate agreement with Gannett. We rolled out 110 markets on our classified platform. And when we got in there, they said, we'd like to add, use your system for Monster because we can't sell all the Monster upgrades with our front ends because they're so old, we can't modify them and we can't take advantage of it. 90 days later, we had a Monster input system for them. They used in their call center and they increased their revenue by millions of dollars. We worked very closely with NewsCycle, because most of the customers were using ad-based and we had an interface to their system, and they had acquired Kango, and they wanted to shut Kango down, and Kango was going to go out of business. So we took over all their Kango sites, and that solidified our relationship with Hearst and Media News Group, who were the two biggest Kango users. And then we started focusing on digital. We added programmatic, we added Facebook. All these things that we added came from customer requirements. They all would say, hey, could you guys do this? And we would go back and we would do it. This year, we've rolled out Facebook for obituaries, which some of the presenters are going to talk about. We also signed a corporate agreement with McClatchy for public notices, which is just starting to roll out now. Now, most self-service systems will do one or the other. They'll do e-commerce or they'll do publishing. You build some systems like subsystems, you can publish digital ads with them. Some just do the e-commerce side. Okay, well, we do both. But we also do a third thing. Because our backgrounds are heavily steeped in systems integration, we had no problem getting our hands dirty and integrating processes, because that's where the return on investment was. So if you look at the typical sales workflow, you've got selling, you've got building your creative, and then you have fulfillment. These are three distinct steps by three completely different groups of people, and sometimes even outsourced. So what we do when we implement is we take those three steps and we built it into one workflow. This opens up an enormous opportunities for our publishing partners to look and say, gee, how can we implement this technology, which maybe we never thought of doing before? So we've taken that workflow, and this is where a lot of the return on investment comes from our customers, and they'll be talking about that today during the presentations. So having provided that background, let me talk a little bit about our integration capability, because along the way, we ran into all these different systems. So we had our ad portal system. The first systems we integrated with were front ends for billing and print pagination. We started with AdBase, which was NewsCycle, and now Naviga. Then we added BrainWorks. Just recently, we've added Lineup. We're working with Utah on a Mirabel interface. And we've added Vision Data and Newsware just recently. In Miles 33, we have a few sites. We then added payment systems. There isn't a payment system we have an interface to, so we could automate credit cards. We then added a number of different third-party systems for both importing data and exporting and fulfilling campaigns. So when you look at this slide, I mean, there isn't anything that we can't integrate with in the newspaper industry. But again, we did this all within the scope of our platform. Okay? So having provided that background, now what I'd like to do is get to the meat of the matter and let our stars take over. So our first panelist is Sally Steed. And Sally is the Senior Vice President of Advertising at the Utah Media Group. Sally's been working with us. She's been there for 18 years, but only been working with us for a few years. She's working on a number of different projects right now. They are putting a new front end system in, and they're also changing to a weekly publication schedule. So she's going to talk a little bit about that and how she's worked with iPublish. Sally?
Thank you, Brian. So as Brian mentioned, I have actually been with Utah Media Group 16 years and about 14 years at Panasonic before that. So quite a long time with the newspaper. And one of the first things I learned in coming in is the relationship that we valued so much with iPublish. So it's not very hard for me to get on here and brag about iPublish. They do a great job for us. As we started out, our company thrives on having solutions, on having the best service in town. You may not always be the only game in town. You may not always be the best game in town, but if you can provide the best customer service in town, then you'll win 9 times out of 10. So that's always something we're looking at, is how do we make our service better? And I'll talk about that a little bit. First, I want to touch on the next slide. With just our experience working with iPublish from beginning to end, they're very much a company that is, what can we do? There's so many different vendors that we work with that are first to tell us what they can't do. Here's what we can't do. iPublish is the opposite. They're a what can we do? It began with us just wanting to do some obit input services with them, and quickly turned into what is everything that they have, because they're second to none as far as service. There is never a time they don't pick up their phone, and any problem we've ever had is fixed immediately. There's almost no other vendors we can say that about. So I can't say enough good about the actual iPublish group. So as I said, it randomly started as just an input type of system. We figured best service in town, it starts and ends with you, with the company itself. We knew if we could make it easier for the people entering obits and make their customer service experience better, it would be better in the end. We call it a service up mentality. And quickly it changed the scenario on our input team. We'd been putting it through Mactive. It had been a nightmare. iPublish quickly stepped in, and our input staff, the experience that they had led all of us in the direction that we were today. It was second to none. Quickly, we put our funeral homes over as a vendor to use the same system, hoping it would have the same effect. It did. It not only strengthened our relationships with them, it grew the amount of business they did with us. How long was the obituary? How many pictures did the obituary have? When the system got easier to use and the fixes were so easy, their experience improved, and so did the revenue with it. At a time when newspaper readership was falling in double digits, we've been able to maintain their business at the funeral homes and gain in a lot of cases. So it's made the difference. I give iPublish a lot of credit for that. And third part, it made the experience better for our readers. So not only with having a better obituary, obviously starting with how funeral homes engaged with it, we now use a self-serve portal for our readers to enter their own. And so far that has been a home run. When the reader themselves is entering and creating their own obituary in an easy format, they add more pictures. The obituary is longer. It adds more elements. They add little snippet pictures. They get carried away with the experience and they spend more. So service up mentality. The graph basically shows you exactly what I'm referring to, is that while newspaper readership, we all know, has gone down and is half of what we used to be in the big years, our revenue has remained strong. This year we're on target to exceed revenue, actually. Not just because of COVID and not just because there's more deaths, but because of the user experience continues to increase. We recently went with their legal program, and I don't know that they wanted me to touch on that today, but I can't say enough good about how easy it makes the legal ads to enter. And same kind of experience. It's going to be a personal experience with the people entering those legal ads. They feel like they have control. That's where they like to be. And because of it, you hold your revenue or gain in almost every case. So that's it from my end, Brian. Brian, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I was muted. Sorry about that. Thanks, Sally. Thank you very much. So our next panelist is Michael Fibison. We've known Michael for quite some time at previous organizations, and just joined Advance, I think 3 or 4 years ago. And he's been instrumental in helping us extend our reach across the Advance and customer base and marketplaces. We just recently signed a new agreement with them for a revenue enhancement, which he's going to touch on. And Michael, I will turn it over to you.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you all for the time today. Thanks for the invitation. And it's great to see some familiar faces on the panel as well. I'll spend the next half an hour talking about myself, which is pretty typical. I have a couple of different.
Michael, you got 10 minutes, buddy.
This is what I do every day. It's a little diverse, but I have some responsibility on inside sales. I've got a retail team that is a consolidated team that I spend a good chunk of time working on. We sell into our footprint as a company from a single location. Retail, print, and digital there. I also have the pleasure of working on some verticals, which brings me to this topic today and maybe gives me affords me some relevance to the topic. So recruitment, real estate, obituaries, I spend some good amount of time working on those. And then I also dabble in some of the emerging revenue, things like our performance marketing campaigns and programs and location marketing and some of those new acronyms that everybody's talking about, OTT and CTV and all that. But enough about me. Let me talk about my company. In case you're not familiar with Advance, we are one of the larger privately owned companies. We're part of Advance, which you can see Advance Local is a part of that overall group. We're an operating company within that. Some big names there, Condé Nast, ACBJ, Iron Man, and some very interesting companies and some data companies like 1010 Data and some major investments in some others. That's our parent corporation and how we fit in. You probably know us in our next iteration, which is really some of our local brands. So in addition to the newspapers that we have really from those newspapers, we have kind of regional portals that's been the strategy for years, which I think is a good one. Some of them with city names, some of them with state names, but you probably know us, love us, and compete with us. And we like to say we do a good job in those markets. So some recognizable brands from coast to coast, all the way over to our West Coast with Oregon Live. So that's a bit about our web presence. Some of the newspapers you might recognize: the Star Ledger, the Plain Dealer, Grand Rapids Press, the Oregonian, and you can see some others here. Some really iconic newspapers and traditional newspapers that's been around a long time, like many of you in your markets and your local markets. So that's just a little bit about who we are. And when we look to partner with someone, we look for a partner that's going to bring innovation And that's what brings me here today. And you see some of the innovations that I'll spend apparently 10 minutes only talking about, that come to us through our relationship with iPublish. And I have worked with them under a couple of different flags and companies, and they've always been a tremendous partner. And the thing that I love is they bring us ideas on how to reinvigorate some of these revenue streams that are really critical. So I've put up here just a couple of the things that we've looked to. Tributes, for example, which maybe you call it In Loving Memory, or there's different names, but it's really that quarterly publication of the obituaries that is enabled through the system. A couple of years ago, we used that as a real trigger for revenue and for service. And one of the themes I've been working on with our funeral home directors has been giving back and providing additional value, not just to the funeral home directors, but ultimately to the families. And I think that's something that our partnership with iPublish has helped us do. One of the examples of how they've been agile in their approach, we had another opportunity to introduce, again, the value back to families and to funeral homes through plaques. And a lot of you are probably doing something similar, but we came to iPublish and said, how can we make this a seamless and really easy implementation for the self-service, both from the family standpoint and from the funeral home and from our own operations, where we often use the technology as the front end system. And they were able to do a custom development that made that seamless and effortless. And also it makes it very easy for us to roll out in additional markets. So, again, an example of how they're willing to, just go beyond the normal scope of it and act more like a partner than a vendor, as they always do. Real estate self-service, I think many of you are looking at that. We're piloting that in one market. We've had some fits and starts as a company, but now we think we've got a real workable model that's going to reinvigorate what is a declining revenue stream for us, which is really kind of the listings model that many of you probably are doing in that vertical across your properties. And then, of course, Facebook Obits, which I'm really excited to talk about, and we'll get into that more here in a minute or two. So speaking of obituaries, when I look at our company for the past couple of years, it looks like this relatively stable kind of revenue stream, right? And this is where you get that beautiful picture of a wood duck. And I did grow up in Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota, so I'm pretty sure that's a wood duck. So the point of putting it there is that little duck, and I don't know about your operations, but our operations, we are paddling like crazy to keep that revenue stream where it needs to be. And a lot of what you've seen from iPublish has helped us keep that revenue stream fairly stable. And it's significant. I looked at, when you look at local revenue, locally generated revenue, let's call it from our local operations, just ballparking it, it's roughly 12% of our local revenue stream, just in obituaries. That's a significant chunk of our overall operation. And it's been, kind of steady, plus or minus a little bit for the past couple of years. That's through innovation. That's through adding new products and providing value back to families, back to, through our funeral homes, which I call the great reseller group for us. And there's some things really challenging this category, right? You all know this, the volume of cremations. I was just looking the other day, I think the Funeral Director Associations, they're projecting in 15 years, 75% of end-of-life rituals are going to take place in the form of cremation. And we all know that's putting pressure on the price points for obituaries, because the cremation is a lot less expensive than the traditional funeral that would, the obit would be part of that process. And then you've got the social practices around end of life, you've got social media, and all of that is impacting obit volume. We saw 10 points or so in 2019. That's paid obit volume. unique obit volume. We're seeing that lessen in 2020, but there's circumstances contributing, I think, in a big way to volumes increasing, unfortunately, as we know, in the world. And then I'll say this: the obituaries are no longer inelastic, and by that I mean it used to be that we could come out with the brilliant idea to raise rates because we could raise rates. And we didn't have to give value. We didn't have to come back and give back. We had, we would change column width and increase a little bit on the font. And we were justified in raising rate. We can't do that. And one of the things we can do is give back value. And that's what we look to our partners at iPublish to help us provide. Overall, for the ad portal and obits, we did 2018. We had a multiple different, solutions out there that we were leveraging. We really took the Tributes product to leverage it as a change, as a real catalyst for us to convert people over to the same system. We're still doing that. As you know, these things take time. We'll have our final group moved over in 2021, and that affords us with a lot of opportunities. For the groups that implemented Tributes, we saw revenue year-over-year growth from that initial project of between 3 and 31%. We had a few markets that didn't implement a change. They're holding on. They were saying they didn't want to go with a rate increase or anything like that. And those markets, unfortunately, they had year-over-year declines. And there's a lot of discussion that we're having about rate versus volume and what's the right trigger. We're settling on giving back volume to the value. And we're doing that through these things that iPublish has brought up there. Operationally, the transition has allowed us to do, innovation. You heard about the plaques and the bookmarks, for example. We're talking now about cross-market collaboration where we can do overflow on weekends where we have a staffing issue. We can do that by nature of this new tool that we've got that goes across those. We also had, savings in terms of troubleshooting different systems, supporting those different systems, and ultimately it gives us an opportunity to think about future consolidation if that's an option. So all those things were benefits. And we're really looking forward to this. On December 1st, we've got 2 markets that are rolling out Facebook obituaries, the ability to post those in a paid format. We really think it's a strategic key to the future of where memorialization as a ritual is going. And by that, I mean, we're now claiming our space on social media as the place where obituaries come into play. And we're doing it in a way that I think is going to provide a tremendous amount of value for the families that are making that purchase through us. We're looking at lift and revenue from this year over year. Depending on what kind of pricing we're developing, 5 to 10%. And I got to tell you, we're really close. We're about 2 weeks out from the first launch. We've got a webinar set for Friday with one of our markets and the funeral home directors, and it's been a light lift. The team at iPublish has been tremendous. They've really helped us get through this, and we anticipate that with the remainder of our markets, which we're looking at the end of Q2, end of Q1, Q2 start of being completely rolled out. So I'll move along to the next item, which I think is really, we are testing real estate. We think there's a real opportunity for self-serve. We think, again, we're piloting in 1 market. We're anticipating a revenue lift. And again, really kind of breathing some life back into the listings model and also selling at the broker and agent level. A lot of our markets have migrated to things like builders and focusing on those for revenue, but we think there's an opportunity. We also think Zillow is doing some bad things in the marketplace, and it's freed up a little niche in there where we can re-engage with those realtors and those brokers. And we think self-serve is the way to do it. And we're leveraging iPublish again to bring that innovation into the market in a new and refreshed way to try to supplant some of our eroding revenue on the traditional kind of listings in the newspaper model. And what you're looking at here is the impact that this technology has had for us. We're a private company, so we're not going to share dollars with you, but I can tell you they're substantial. And the implementation you can see as that increase, and this is projected revenue from our partners at iPublish. What you're seeing there is the impact of implementing some of these systems. I don't think I mentioned this, but one of our markets, for example, with Ad Portal obits, is now, enjoying 90% of our obituary volume being done via self-service. And that has led to things like longer obituaries because the families are able to see it. That has led to revenue growth in certain markets. And that's a key, element that I would share with the group. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's where I get the cane to pull me off the stage. But
Mike, you did great. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the 90% self-serve rate is a little bit higher than our national average, actually. We have 140 obit sites. So at this point, I want to introduce Ed Woods. Ed is the Vice President and Chief Revenue Officer for Media News Group Northeast. And Ed was faced with certain challenges when he got into that position. He had 2 regions turned into one with 2 completely different front end systems. Then they went and acquired the Boston Herald, had another system. So he's going to talk about working with us and how we've helped him get through all this. And Ed, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Brian. Let me just start by saying some of the same things that Michael said. It was nice to see some familiar people. We mentioned before the public joined that we're probably the same people in this business for a long time. You could tell by my white hair, although if I remember, I had white hair when I started in this business, so I can't blame my age or the business. But some of us have been doing this for a long time, and I think it's important to sort of recognize that from the start. That can be a good thing because we have a lot of experience as an industry and within our individual organizations, but we also come to work with a certain mindset. And it was the mindset that could have stood in the way, and I think did stand in our way in the past, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. So my role at Media News Group goes back to 2004, before Media News and JRC merged. I was an ad director for JRC in 2004. Before that, I was with Gannett for a number of years, so I've been doing it a long time. Been in the publisher role, in the group publisher role, vice president role, and now, as Brian said, I am responsible for all the properties that Media News Group owns in the Northeast. Those properties are now in Massachusetts and in New York. I started working with these guys in 2016, although the organization had been working with them before. I knew their products, I knew some of the opportunities, but I was a little bit removed from the direct contact until 2016, when I walked in the door at the New Haven Register in sort of this problem-solving role. And the folks there said, we can't get obits on the iPublish platform off the ground here at the New Haven Register. Could you help us figure that out? That was the Media News Group staff. So I called Brian at the time and I said, okay, what's been the struggle? He shared with me the struggle. It's that whole sort of mindset where we bring our sort of opinion to work. And it's not important. There isn't enough connection between the company and the vendor. There wasn't a strong enough relationship for people to sort of kick back and talk truth about what the benefits were and what the pain points were within the organization to make that happen. So to make a very long story short, I asked Brian to come in. And he did. He showed up at the New Haven Register. We got a group of funeral homes together. It was back in the day when we did that, hoping that someday we'll do that again, but for today we don't. Brian came to the register. I had a room full of funeral home directors and my staff in the room, and his group taught the platform from beginning to end. And Brian said this that day to that group. He said, one of the benefits of the funeral home using this platform is something that we don't think about all that often. But if the family is sitting writing the obituary with the funeral home, and they can grow it and shrink it, live on screen in the production system based on their own wishes and budget. They plug in the family's credit card number to make the payment, and the funeral home is not carrying the receivable. That resonated loud, and I will tell you that in my use now of iPublish, I use that as part of my sales pitch as I'm teaching and training our self-serve platforms. So I left Media News, I left Connecticut when we sold it to Hearst. I was asked to stay with the group, and like Brian said, sort of join these two groups together, Massachusetts and New York, into one region. Media News Group, I didn't say this before, very fragmented. For those of you that know the company, the understanding was these are small, little, independent operating units of Media News Group, and Media News Group Corporate isn't going to get in your way. We're going to let you do it your way, and we're here for you if you need us. Well, if you're a local operator, you don't think you need anybody, right? So you're going to run it your way. You're going to make your own decisions. In today's world, that's complicated, right? Because there's no uniformity anywhere. So like Brian said, 2 front-end systems, one in Massachusetts, one in New York. And these 2 regions were actually under very separate ownership and very different idealistic outlook on life, to be honest with you. And then, of course, we bought the Boston Herald out of bankruptcy, for those of you that didn't know that, in 2018, independently owned. Very iconic in its position in the community, and we were the big bad guys coming in and taking over, right, the Boston Herald. So I had the challenge at the same time of bringing another independent into the group. I realized in working with the iPublish team that they were able to help me with that sort of across the board approach without making it sound cookie cutter and without making it sound like corporate takeover. So I think what was most important was they took the time to engage with individual stakeholders in my operation, not just me, and share what could be the outcome of doing it together and doing it on a common platform, so that at the end of the day, just like Brian said at the beginning, any one of his engineers could help at any one of his sites. That was a goal that I had 3.5 years ago when I came to this Northeast region, and we're getting there now. And iPublish has been a big part of that evolution. So we use obits in all of our markets now. We added the lasting memories, tributes, and pop mount to that. We got a little bit serious toward well, I guess it was sort of COVID related, right? Where we were looking for efficiencies in our organization. We, like most people in the industry, looked for efficiencies after COVID struck everywhere we could, because we didn't know what revenue would look like. We've seen things stabilize now, but we didn't know what it would be in March, April, May. So I started looking at ways that we could bring the efficiencies that we've learned in certain categories over to other categories. Don't be afraid of this self-serve idea. It sounds very distant from the customer. It sounds very non-engaging with the customer. And I want to be honest with you, that's not the truth at all. As a matter of fact, we engage on a more strategic level with our customers now, because we have a common platform for them to use, and we can talk to them about the ways that their peers are using the resources that we offer, rather than being bogged down. And I say that, you know, with all respect, rather than being bogged down in the transactional business that we were having to do before using these platforms. So I asked these guys recently in the last couple of months to look at launching us in the public notice portal as well. We're getting that finalized. We're going in early 2021. Same thing in the public notice portal that I said about the use of the end user's credit card. So one example of that is in Boston, there's a municipality that is the issuing body for liquor licenses. If I'm going to open a liquor store or a bar or whatever it is, I have to run a public notice and I have to pay for it. but I have to go to the municipality to do that. The municipality now has to carry the receivable. They have to keep track of who owes them the money. I'm not keeping track of the receivable because I don't care who the guy is that's opening the bar, right? I don't have a relationship with him. The disconnect between us and the actual end user, pretty big one. Public notices will allow that end user to go in, connect his own notice, his own liquor license application notice to the municipality that he's running it in and under, and the municipality will no longer carry the burden or the receivable. I got a lot of municipality clerks on my side when I started talking about that in the last couple of months. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. That begged the conversation of what else are we looking at that still might be fragmented that we could take advantage of. Put yourself in the shoes of your readers, your audience, your customers. If it can be done, and we can make it easy for the reader, the audience, the buyer of that notice to stay in control, that's what they want. So for them to be able to get in, do it on their own time, use their own method of payment and not be surprised and relying on others, it's an absolute win. And iPublish makes it possible for us to be able to stay involved where we need to, because you'll have those guys that'll always say, my staff won't use it, my customers won't use it, the funeral home director says, I'm not turning that over to the family, they're too distraught. That whole thinking subsides after the funeral director uses it and realizes how user-friendly it is, even in that emotional state. I want to mention one more important point about my relationship with these guys that I publish. You know, everything comes at a cost, and cost is something that Media News Group forces me, like many of you I'm sure are always looking at, return on investment. So Brian and Kim and others at iPublish have been in the know when I have said to them, I have to build an ROI that makes sense. I see it, but help me put it together and help me put it in front of my bean counters that are going to sign off on this thing so that I can get it signed off on. And I've had their sort of input at the table. So they have become much more than just another vendor to me. And honestly, they become friends. So Impact, thanks for moving me along there. I feel a little bit like Mr. Fibison, who warned that he was going to talk for 30 minutes. I'm not going to do that. Reduction in operating costs, that means in the addressing the elephant in the living room, are you able to reduce staffing costs? Where that doesn't make sense, and where I'm at today, guys, is am I able to redirect that talent to places where it can be more strategic? That's absolutely the case. We brought our fragmented region into one. We constantly exchange ideas with iPublish. These guys are thinking for us in a lot of cases because we're so busy. You know, we should have our eyes open and our finger on the pulse of everything, but it's not as easy. So we feel like we have more eyes in the field. They deliver what we agree. They've been able to deploy, we've been able to deploy more resources in more revenue generating roles. So yeah, and away from the high volume, low value transactional business, that's sort of what I was saying before. Open dialogue between the iPublish team and my team has been the success of the relationship, and I see that lasting well into the future. Brian and his team built this. It's a very good illustration of how in the Media News Group history, the revenue grew, and you'll see the 2020 revenue being at the highest that it's ever been. You know, Michael referenced the fact that in categories where we used to be able to take revenue increases because we thought that the user had to buy, right? An OBIT has to be paid for, a legal notice has to be paid for. There are options, there's cost cutting going on all over the place. So building value is the way to increase revenue in those key categories, and it takes this approach to do it. So that's all I have, Brian. I've enjoyed the relationship, and I'm enjoying continuing it into the future.
Okay. Well, Ed, thank you very much for that. So, James, you've been monitoring questions. Do we have any questions at all that have come in?
None as yet.
Okay. So in preparation for that, we came up with a couple of questions. It is the afternoon on the East Coast. It's almost 4 o'clock. So I know people are probably looking at their watches going, when is this going to end? So now hopefully this has been very beneficial and informative. We really appreciate your attending. But I'm going to throw out a question and I'll let any of the three panelists answer it if they'd like. So what technology direction would you recommend to other publishers? Any?
I'm just going to start the conversation, Brian, by saying keep an open mind.
Okay.
Don't be afraid of technology. End user friendly technology. Those are the things that we felt were sort of lacking in our world. As we looked at ways that we could bring efficiency with the ROI, either on the revenue side or the expense side. But technology is something that should not be, we shouldn't be afraid of it.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Mike?
Yeah, the only thing I would say too, Brian, is, and I come at a little different view in this role where I'm not an individual operating unit. So take it for, what it's worth, but having some consistency across multiple locations and viewing the architecture. And I think, Brian, you alluded to this in the beginning about how you structured your architecture to be able to be agile. I think that's a critical, step for newspapers and newspaper groups, because we traditionally, as Ed was describing, we've sort of gone at this from a local perspective, and what happens is you have to untangle all of that to try to move to something that's consistent. And we're starting to see the economies of scale from having a consistent technological approach. So don't look at it as an isolated add-on sort of project. Look at it across the board, and if you can, think of your operation as an architecture, it's worth taking the time to think of it that way, because it's a lot harder to do what a lot of us have done, which is unravel sort of a lot of different, I think of it this way. It's kind of like a hedge that hasn't been trimmed in a while, and you've got a lot of interesting things going in all different directions, but it's a lot nicer if it's been sort of trimmed and shaped, and that takes a lot of discipline. And I know we're not structured that way often as an industry, but if you can do that, that can avoid some serious pitfalls in time and rework that you have to go through to get to a common platform or a common solution. And ultimately, I see the impact of that on our customers, because we're not able to get there. We're not thinking of our overall business. We're still siloed in, traditional old things like classified or retail or, different little areas, and we're not looking at the whole overall approach.
Okay, that's very good input, Michael.
Hey, Brian, one thing, I would just echo what these guys said, but another reminder to get in the mind of your reader and get in the mind of your customer, because we live in a world where people want to self-serve. They don't actually want to talk to a salesperson anymore. They don't care about spending an hour on the phone placing an obit when they can build it themselves and do it in a format that's very easy. They'll spend more, they'll run it longer, you'll make more money. Pay attention to the readers.
Okay, thanks, Sally. Yeah, what's been interesting, I talked about the technology platform. When we first started implementing this software, 12, 13, 14 years ago, the organizations that we dealt with were very decentralized, and we designed it so that it could be very local, because one of the questions we always received was, well, can we have a different set of packages by locality? Can we support it locally? So we actually designed it that way, but we also designed it in a way that if we needed to change it, we could. And Gatehouse gave us the first opportunity to build a single system, which we did when we implemented Classified. And just recently, we started working with Gannett and with McClatchy because they're looking at consolidation like most large organizations are. And I think what Michael was referring to is something that they have on their radar screen as well. Is there a way that we can consolidate operations? So we've been able to very quickly and adapt now that we could basically launch, we could put the whole computer industry, the whole newspaper industry on a single system if we were asked to do it. And that's how well designed the software is. So we've been spending a lot of our time, especially in the last 12 to 18 months, on helping operations consolidate. So technology is, but in doing that, we get high marks a lot for our ease of use. You've heard it mentioned, each one of the presenters talked about it. But there's a lot of complexity underneath the hood. We just don't expose it. So we take those 3 steps, we create one workflow, and that gets very complicated. But the advertiser never sees it. A real estate agent buys a Facebook campaign. They don't have to really know much about Facebook. They put the address in, they put the duration in, they choose a package, boom, done. And we run a targeted campaign for them. So we'll continue to do that. And then our technology is very well designed, very flexible. One
Brian,
last.
we did get.
Okay, go ahead, James. Mm-hmm.
We did get a question. Pam asks, do any of the speakers work with an outsourced classified team along with iPublish? And if so, how's it working?
We are embarking on that, and we'll have that accomplished in first quarter of 2021. So I'll report back then. But we anticipate no difference between our internal. We have some regional consolidation efforts that have been long standing, and for what it's worth, I referenced the 90% self-serve market. One of those happens to be in a consolidated group where effectively it's an in-source instead of an outsource model. Will be outsourced again first quarter of 2021 in one of our larger markets, and we feel like there should be, actually it's going to help us achieve more efficiency by leveraging the iPublish software, to be honest.
Right. Yeah, we actually have worked with Media Sales Plus from upstate New York, outside of Buffalo, a number of places. Hearst is one I know that uses them. So to answer Pam's question, yes, our system works very well in that type of workflow. Any other questions? Anyone want to comment about COVID at all? Has that made you rethink things, and did you see opportunities coming out of it? Possibly.
Brian, I'm assuming you're asking us as panelists, so
right.
I'm going to jump in and answer that. So obviously, COVID-19 has forced us to look at things differently. From the beginning of the pandemic, it was looking at things safely from a distance. How do you do that? If you think about a portal like what iPublish offers, obviously it feels safer and self-serve, and the whole e-commerce thinking makes more sense. Longer term, I think that the end user is going to feel more comfortable engaging for themselves. We won't be in the presence of people like we used to be for I think a very long time, even when we recover, whatever that looks like, vaccine, whatever it is. So that will, I think, give us a place to look long term as we're looking at ways that we can continue to tweak things that we're doing, not lose the headway that we've gained up until now, and just sort of continue to churn through and continue to make things work. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay. Michael, Sally, anything you want to add or specific to that? No. Okay.
I mean, I'll just pull from what Sally said earlier about self-serve, and that I see that as an expectation, because so much is being transacted via the online world, whether it's your consumers doing that for their own personal goods and things. I think there's a more and more an expectation that we would have that capability, and it would be a smooth and easy, workflow for them. I think it's the onus is on us to make sure that we deliver that to our consumers, because I would say we haven't done a really great job as an industry so far to do that.
Yeah, Brian, my comment is just evolve or die. This is what COVID has caused us to do is evolve as companies, and newspapers tend to be kind of slow at evolving. It's forced us to push the trigger and evolve and go online and do things in a smarter way. So it's a good thing. That's one good thing to come of it.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And I'd like to thank all three of the presenters, Ed, Michael, Sally. Thank you very much for, I know you guys are really busy, and to dedicate this much time to this is really appreciated. So hopefully everyone got some good information out of this. If you want to reach out to us, sales@ipublishmedia.com is the best way to get us, or you can go to our website. Emily, do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will have a recording of this event for your consumption later to share around at your organizations as well. So look for that in your email. And thank you, iPublish, and all of the panelists for joining us today.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.